All right, how's everybody doing? We're back at it again, another Tuesday night. So yeah, last week unfortunately I wasn't able to do the live stream, but hopefully we'll make up for it this Tuesday tonight. So really looking forward to kind of getting into what we've got going on tonight. Really interesting stuff. So I mean, when I kind of got into the two whiskeys that were sent, it was one of those things where immediately you kind of knew that you were kind of on to something. So I figured, hey, let me get in touch with the guys at Found North, kind of put a little something together. Fortunately, we were able to do it fairly quickly. So really looking forward to tonight. So yeah, last week, my dad and I, we were down in Kentucky, just kind of doing a little yearly father-son thing. And, usually is where we end up in Kentucky, where all the whiskey and stuff is. So yeah, anyway, let me say hi to everybody in the chat real quick, and then we'll bring Nick on, and we'll kind of get into a few things there. So, all right, first out of the gate, my man Griff, how's it going, buddy? I appreciate you jumping in. Sugar Kitty, thanks for jumping in tonight. Cheech, Hendo, Marty, Whiskey Nose, how's it going, buddy? What else we got here? I'm gonna go through this. TK, Trevor Kunkel, how's it going, buddy? Mike Franklin. Christopher David, how's it going, my man? Appreciate you jumping in. Tony Two Toes. Matt Junick, how's it going, bud? Brian Toner. My man from the north, Alex, this will resonate with you, bud. Joint you'll like tonight. So Johnny T, how's it going? Tim Garrigus, how's it going, bud? My man Ethan Turk, the Turkmeister, how's it going, buddy? Hi, Sherry, how's it going? All right, so IC86, how's it going? Mike Meyer, how's it going, Mike? All right, if I missed you guys, I apologize. I'll get you. So if anyone has any questions, Jamie Williams, how's it going, Jamie? If anyone has any questions later on, we can fire those at Nick. I'll bring him on here real quick. We'll kind of get into some of the whiskeys, but before that, we'll learn a little bit more about kind of Nick and some of his background. So let me bring Nick on, and we'll get going. And again, if anybody has any questions, just tag me in the comments, and we'll get those answered for you. So, all right, let me bring him on here real quick. There's the man.
What's up?
How's it going? Thanks for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you. Honestly, just talking with you backstage beforehand, I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, tonight will be fun. And Nick and I, we talked a little bit yesterday. I told him kind of once I got the whiskeys and dove into it, with a lot of us who do these whiskey reviews and, we get to try a lot of things. You never know quite what you're going to get into. But when I first saw some of the ages, had a little idea as to based on the name of the company, what the ages of the whiskey, maybe where it was coming from a little bit. But those ages on whiskeys, no matter what they are, it always resonates. Things with age on them a lot of times have those nice complexities. And both of these, as I got into them, they had some different kind of little differences on both. And Nick will be able to kind of explain a little bit more about, each one and kind of how they came to creating batch 1 and 2. But first, let me ask you this. Before we get into any of this, outside of your whiskey, what whiskey have you been sipping on recently or enjoying? I always like to ask everybody, like, outside of your whiskey, if you didn't own this brand, what have you been sipping on and enjoying recently?
I'm a Four Roses addict. I've got a collection right now of nothing crazy, like 35 or 40 open single barrels of Four Roses.
Okay.
I mean, it's it's my absolute favorite. It's really my favorite go-to from just look. I like to sit down with certain whiskeys and really spend time with them.
Yeah.
I don't have very many, like, people will say like, oh, what's your drinker? I don't have the liver capacity actually to have a drinker, but I do occasionally want to drink something that really hits the money for me and intrigues me, but I can still be social. I'm not with my headphones and my blindfold on off in the corner. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I'm not taking my crazy notes. And Four Roses single barrels, I think it's just the 10 recipes. you just get a level of diversity. You get consistency and diversity. You know, you get the best of both worlds. And I personally think that Brent Elliott is an absolute mad genius.
Couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. So that's the thing with Four Roses. I mean, just everything, all of the different complexities and where you can go with each batch and recipe. I mean, it's all over the place. You can always constantly get something a little bit different. But one thing with Four Roses is you always kind of know what you're going to get, and that's consistency. You know, you're going to get a great bourbon. I mean, all the way from, you know, their old yellow label from the bottom, like all the way up to their LE releases, all of those things, you're going to get something that's worth, you know, kind of diving into. So,
and I mean, I think if you really look at them from a historical standpoint, the recent history, their old history's really fun. But if you look at recent history, what Rutledge was able to do from a distillation standpoint, you know, being able to take something that was really graded as a low grade spirit and just almost instantaneously make it a top notch spirit again. But then I honestly think Brent Elliott might have the best palate in the business. His SBLEs are a dream come true, and like I've been a huge fan of his for as long as I've been working in the industry.
Well, you know, and that's the thing with that, like you said before, not to go down this, you know, kind of down this rabbit hole.
We could talk for an hour and a half about this.
We could talk about this for forever. But yeah, like you said before, Four Roses prior to, you know, Rutledge being there, I mean, that was like almost gut rot whiskey for the most part, you know, not very good. But anyway, all right, we digress. So let's get into it a little bit. So before we kind of get into the whiskey and the brand and all that, why don't you, if you don't mind, kind of just sharing a little bit about you and kind of your background and just kind of how it all started.
Yeah, I you know, I think about this all the time. Like what is the actual starting point? You know, I founded this company with my brother, and I was really when we started this, I was the whiskey hound. I was the one who was really into whiskey. So a lot of times I get sort of the credit for, you know, I was the one who was into whiskey. I asked him to work with me. But legitimately, I have the best. It's so cliche. I have the best big brother on the planet. He's 4 years older than me. When we grew up, seriously, when we were young, every time there was a horizon, which is just a funny thing to say, but literally, like, we'd be on a beach, we'd be on the top of a mountain, wherever it was. Whenever there was a horizon, he used to come up and put his arm around me at 12 years old and just say, "Nick, our life's going to be an adventure."
Wow.
And it was so funny. And whiskey is our adventure, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think like a lot of that is really poured into the label. You know, I always was sort of minimalist when I would think about labels. But then we started creating our label, and it has some minimalist elements to it. You know, I don't think it's really over the top, but I really feel like our personality and the way we see whiskey is like right there front and center. And that's really fun. And that the topographical map that's on the, you know, that's really on the sort of screen printing that's on the label. That has the little, you know, paths to nowhere, and just the idea of Found North, of going and finding something is really very, very true to how we got started, you know, 25 years ago. But to be honest with you, the way the company actually started was really, I got into whiskey really in about 2014. I'm a little late. Well, a little late to the game, but I was young. I went to actually Scotland for 30 days. I went to 40 distilleries. I literally just bought a ticket there and a ticket back. I hitchhiked. I wasn't old enough to rent a car. I hitchhiked. I walked, and I took public transportation, and probably the third I did the least. And I just, Scotland is like Kentucky. You know, you go there and like the moment you're there, you kind of feel it, right? I mean, when you go to Kentucky, you go to a place like Wild Turkey, and you know, there's some guy named John or Steve or whatever, and he's been working, you know, as the grain receiver for 42 years. You know what I mean? And you just get this feeling of like, wow, there's really, that in and of itself says something. And so I always wanted to work in this industry right off the bat. Got a job as a in retail, selling whiskey, and worked my way up to being the kind of the director of whiskey for a chain of retailers in Boston. And then once I'd really gotten my feet wet, I called my brother and I said, let's jump in. And we kind of, not to ramble too much, but we really, we started out just as for hire brand ambassadors for whoever would hire us.
Mm-hmm.
We built a following. We were able to hire a really talented guy from Edrington. And the whole time we were looking for good whiskey that we could bottle, that we could affect, that we could make our own. And it took a good 3.5, 4 years before we really locked in on a source of whiskey that we thought was good enough and differentiated enough. We didn't want to make something that, not to dog anyone, but we just didn't want to make something that was already there. What I mean? It's already on the market.
Yeah.
So very surprisingly to us, Canadian whiskey actually gave us the opportunity to really, the way it's made really gave us an opportunity to craft something that was quite differentiated, that really wasn't, we feel like is not represented on the market, and is a little bit of an adventure for people who love American whiskey but are looking for something new and exciting.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, you can, just listening to you talk, you can, and clearly you can see now how it all developed. I mean, the passion for whatever it was that you guys were going to do, you were kind of all in,
Yes.
and I mean, I think that's always a driver for a quality product, no matter what it is. The people who are passionate, and it's like the lifeblood of what it is that they do, that you're not going to compromise on something that, like, we're going to search until we find what we want. Then we're going to do it the way we want, but we're not going to take any shortcuts or anything like that. So that's always something that resonates, with me, is because, I mean, getting passionate about something to me is important. Like, you've got to have something to be passionate about, so this for me is kind of my passion, the whiskey thing, and clearly yours, as well. But I think it's just a great driver for ultimately what it is that you and your brother are putting out now, and what you'll ultimately be putting out, coming down the road. So.
Well, Scott, I mean, honestly, just talking to you before we got in here, and I think some of the things that really resonated with me was how much you enjoy the people aspect of it. And like, I love, not to say I don't love the whiskey. I think the whiskey is very symbolic of the people who make it.
Yeah.
But I also think it's very symbolic of the people who drink it. And that part of the industry, I feel like, doesn't get talked enough about.
Yeah.
And this is such a weird metaphor that always pops in my head. But I always think of whiskey as like a big ship, and it's on the ocean, and everybody who's on board gets it, and they're really excited about it.
Yeah.
And for me, I spent the beginning of my career trying to coax people onto the ship and be like, look, this is a fun journey that you want to be on.
Yeah.
But now being able to blend and make something that we created the label, and we didn't distill liquid. That was part of the name, Found North. We wanted to make it clear that we found it, that we sourced it, that, this isn't grandma's recipe. There's no bullshit in here about but, we've got this generations of whiskey tradition, and no. We sourced this whiskey, but for us, being able to sort of, to blend this stuff and create something that maybe moves the needle just a little bit in terms of making a more diverse landscape for whiskey. It's, rather than being coaxing people onto the ship, we feel like we're the wind that's like, it's like, just redirecting you.
I get it. I mean, that's the thing, like, with everybody who's in the chat, there's so many great people that are in here that I've never met, like all of them. Some of them I have, but it's the best thing. It's like, we're kind of like steering the ship, and they're part of the crew. And we talk and we do these live streams, every week. But, for me to be able to do this and share what it is that you do and your whiskey, the people who are in here, they want to know more about these things. It's just the learning process and all of that. So, I mean, it's a great community. It's a bunch of great people, men and women. So, I mean, I'm happy to share, some of this stuff with everybody tonight. So, all right, why don't we dive into, we kind of touched upon it a little bit, but so the name, I mean, I think your labeling and all of that, everything is transparent. It's what everybody in the whiskey industry, because, you're coming from it, a little bit of the whiskey nerd side. So, what you want to see on a bottle from a company. And now you're giving that. So when people say, what the hell is Found North? Well, just kind of read between the lines and then look at the label. It's basically going to tell you what it is that each of these batches kind of represent. So it's great labeling, great bottle, all of that right out of the gate. So
thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I find that we as a team, we have a ton of retail experience and a ton of customer facing experience, and it's actually unusual from the supply side. A lot of the people who work in making the whiskey have sort of always worked on that side. They haven't bought and sold thousands of different whiskeys.
Yep.
And so for us, like, it wasn't so much as, our ethos is transparency. It was much more just like, people want to know what they're drinking. It's that simple, right?
Yeah.
And so hilariously, the label originally was bigger and had more information. And honestly, we would have kept it on there, but it was just so damn ugly. And there was a point where it was just too much information. We said, all right, the website's got enough. We'll be even more explicit on the website, but let's get all the key features right in there.
Well, you definitely did that. So, all right, why don't we do this? Why don't we kind of jump into we'll jump into the whiskey a little bit. Let's and later on I'll bring up the website. I'll kind of share the screen.
Oh, yeah.
But, so you got batch one right away. Why don't we let's talk a little bit about batch one and kind of what the inspiration behind this batch is.
So the thing with batch one was we knew we were coming out with an age stated rye, and we wanted a substantial age statement, and it's not to say age is everything, right? I've had really good young whiskey. I mean, you were just a peerless. I mean, young whiskey, really good whiskey.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that it has to be old to be good. I would never say that. But there are two things from a chemical standpoint. There are certain things that you only get with age, and it really has to do with the oxidation of the liquid that's in there.
Yeah.
But also there's a.
Let me interrupt you real quick. I'm just gonna bring. I'm gonna bring up the website and just kind of put batch one so people can kind of see a little bit about this. So go ahead and continue to talk about it. And let me bring this up for everybody.
Yeah, so coming out with something that had a substantial age statement on it was important to us, and it was more of just a let's be taken seriously right away. And you come out with a 16-year cask strength rye, there's intrigue immediately. Now the liquid still has to be good, right? That doesn't you don't just, that doesn't buy you the all the way to the finish line. And when we made Found North Batch 1, for us, we were very adamant about making a spicy rye. And I think for what's interesting about rye as an American consumer is rye's only been popular again for the last 10 years ish.
Yeah.
I mean, really, like. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that nobody's been making it for a really long time.
Very true. Very true.
And I think there was a lot of appeal for it because the industry has been moving into hey, we can tolerate a little bit more spice. We can tolerate a little bit more heat, whether you're in the Scotch industry, we can tolerate a little bit more smoke, as long as you're bringing more flavor with it.
Yeah.
And we hadn't seen the sort of the rise on the market taking more risks from a spicy standpoint. There were a lot of those sort of 51-45 ryes, where it's 51 or 51-46, where it's 51% rye, 46% corn. And to be frank with you, when that's in a mash bill, your alcohol yield from the corn is actually almost twice as high as your alcohol yield from the rye. And so if you're doing a 51-46 in the US, I'm sorry, is it a rye or is it really a corn whiskey that's got a lot of rye in it? So for us, I mean, it was, hey, let's give people a rye that's got some breath to it, that really has something to it. And so of course, like, we knew that there were 100% ryes coming out of Canada. When we partnered up with our partner distillery, we were hell bent on making 100% rye. Now, if you can read the label, I mean, 66% rye, 30% corn, 4% malted barley. So we didn't end up on 100% rye, not at all. And the reason was, it was very funny because we had never tried to blend not American whiskey. We had tried to, but we never tried to blend Canadian whiskey. And I was working with the distiller at our partner distillery, and I was like, he kept sending me these samples of rye, and I was blending them, and I kept saying, hey, this is really good, but do you have anything that doesn't have that, really astringent bite to it?
Yeah.
And I swear to God, it was during COVID, so we were always doing it over Zoom. I swear to God, there were a few times where I thought he was just going to reach through the screen and just Indiana Jones my heart right out of my chest. Like I was driving him insane. And, finally, how polite Canadians are, but finally he was like, you fucking Americans don't know what rye tastes like. And I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry, And he was like, let me send you some really old corn components and it's going to blow your mind. And he said, just start playing with them, just start blending with them. And we ended up with this 20-year-old corn whiskey that had been double distilled. So distilled to actually a higher proof than is allowed in the US. And had been aged in used oak for 13 years and then new oak for 7 years. And this is really important. And this is really important because we basically got 13 years of oxygen, not wood. So we got all of the development of this really interesting fruit note and really a creaminess to it from the corn that then got 7 years of new oak. But it already had this really good base. And when we started blending that in with the 16-year Hungarian rye that we're using, and actually the 17-year ex-Speyside we were using, we started getting a combination of like big spice right in your face, right off the bat. You drink it, it's spicy, it makes a statement. But then you take a second sip and you're like, oh shit, this is a lot of creaminess to it. And then you take a third sip and you're like, that has a lot of fruitiness to it. And what I personally always said about a really good whiskey is when you drink it and you finish it, you don't put the glass down and go, hey, what's next?
Yeah.
You put the glass down and you go, someone pour me another of that. I want to go back to it and see what else is going on in there. And that was what we were going for. And I love, honestly, batch 2 has surprisingly for us been a little bit more popular. Just in general, it's got more of that corn sweetness, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Yeah. But with batch 1 is like, it's my firstborn. You know what I mean? Yeah. I love this thing for what it is.
It is a spice. It is like a spice cake. Like when I first tried it, it literally reminded me of like being like with family, like around the holidays. Like it's a total spice cake. Like it's sweet, but man, it definitely lets you know that it's like a spicy meatball. I mean, it's nice and spicy. And I love that. And if you're going to get a rye, especially like this with some age, and you're going to get that complexity, I mean, that aged rye is going to shine. And this is what it's supposed to do, I
love that you say this is what it's supposed to do, because for us, I think we could have made something that was a little milder, honestly, and maybe would have reached a slightly broader base. But we wanted to make something for people who love rye.
No way, man. What you did to this, I'm glad you didn't water this. I'm glad you didn't water this down and do all that. I mean, I think your target market is going to be the person who's looking for what it is that you're describing. If you want like a watered down rye, there's plenty of other ryes. Yeah, there's plenty of other ones that they can go to. I mean, I think you're going to do really well, I think, in this market with this. And it's exciting for me to be able to share it with other people so that hopefully they can take a look at this and get their hands on some of it, even though I did see that it just sold out.
Oh, we should. It should be available. Did you go online? Did you go to bar?
Yeah, I saw something pop up that said like batch 1 and 2 sold out or something.
Oh God. Okay. Well, we'll have to call them. We should have. We'll get them more. You should be able to order it online. It's tricky because our home base is Massachusetts, so we were immediately available in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And we've just started to move into a couple other of the big markets, but we wanted to make it available to people as much as we could. So we set up with the service that will basically they'll do the logistics with you, and we can ship to, I think, 40 states. It might be 39, but we can ship to 40 states. And you know, there are a couple that are really tough about shipping laws we can't get into. But hopefully for the most part, people can order it online if they want it.
Okay, good. I'm glad some of it hopefully is still available. And you guys, I'll have it linked after the video. I'll have it linked the website and all of that, and you guys can see it. I've already brought it up here a couple times, but we'll make sure if anybody wants to find it, they can find it. So yeah, I mean, just getting into when I did, honestly, how I tasted them was in reverse order. I read the labels, and I didn't want, because one sounded, just reading the label and not trying it obviously first. I didn't want what one may have been to necessarily influence like batch 2 basically. So I started with batch 2 and went to 1, and I don't know if it necessarily would have been bad to do it either way. I mean, I think it would have been fine, but when I saw like the space side and all that, I wasn't exactly sure what was in it. Yeah, I was like, oh man, I didn't want that influence to be on 2, and then kind of like, I don't know about 2 or whatever it may be. But I'll tell you what, I mean, just going through both of them were fantastic. And I love just kind of going back to 1. What I'll say is, I mean, I think with the spice, like right up front, is great. You know, it's not a lot of heat. It's just spicy, nice and spicy. But there's that underlying, that little bit of corn sweetness that's there. There's still some nice corn that's in there. So I really kind of like what 1 did. I like the complexity of it. It's nice and creamy and still mouth coating and all of that. So I really, really kind of dig 1. So
it's funny because batch 1 took about 9 months to make. Honestly, I think we went through innumerable test blends, and batch 2 took about 2 weeks. I mean, it was hilarious, but part of that was the learning curve. Jesus, blending, like the thing about Canadian casks is the fundamental difference between American Canadian whiskey, which used to be, by the way, unbelievably integrated, and honestly still is more integrated than people really realize. Mm-hmm. But the fundamental difference between American and Canadian is that American whiskey has a mash bill, right? So you determine the grain ratio right during fermentation, right while you're processing the grain. Mm-hmm. In the early 1900s, bourbon became extraordinarily prescriptive, and basically you had a bunch of people who were ruining whiskey, the rectifiers, and there was a big push to let's create these standards that will elevate the category altogether. Mm-hmm. And it was brilliant because the quality of American whiskey went boom immediately, but it was incredibly prescriptive and therefore restricting, right? And Canadian went completely the other way, and they said, wait a second, we can cultivate enzymes, and therefore we don't need to put malted barley in everything, and now we can actually process these grains individually, and then we can distill them as individual grains. So they make 100% corn, 100% rye, 100% barley. They distill it, age it, and then you blend it all together at the end. Yeah. And my brother calls it just-in-time grain ratios, which I love that concept. But unfortunately, it means that you really don't have finished product when you get, like, if I sent you these components that make up the whiskey, mm-hmm. you'd be like, Jesus, there's some really interesting flavors in here, but none of these are drinkable. Yeah. And so the blending process, like when we started getting samples in, we were like, yeah, you know what? Let's just let's throw paint at the wall. Let's try everything.
Yeah.
And then we learned a really hard lesson in palate fatigue. Because you try something, you'd make something you liked, and then you taste it the next day, and it would be absolute horseshit.
Yeah.
And actually, we went back to to circle back to Four Roses. I interviewed Brent Elliott in 2017 on how he made small batch limited edition. I was in his lab at the distillery, and he took 4 hours to walk me through the whole process. And he tasted me on what they were sampling and sort of and how he did it. And he said, yeah, there's too much whiskey. You need to narrow in on what are your best components.
Yeah.
And then you need to learn them so much that you can imagine them in your head. You should be able to imagine all the flavors in your head. And then he said, then once I know them, I start imagining what they would taste like together, which is just absurd.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I just think that's like,
yeah, that's crazy.
That's legitimately what we did. And it took months for us to really start to master this process. But in the process, I think we really started to figure out how to play with these whiskeys to create something that was differentiated and fun. And so that was really how batch one came to be. To be honest, I don't think we really thought a lot of people would like batch one or batch two.
Really?
We were like, we thought there's going to be this narrow profile of people who want this really big spice, and we thought there's going to be this narrow profile of people who will even drink a corn whiskey that isn't a bourbon, and we said, but that's okay, because there are people, these are our people. This is that sort of 1 to 5% of the market that is looking for these big in your face flavors. And it's been shocking how like much more broad popularity than we expected. And so I really think it's indicative of sort of where the flavor palette's going, which I'm excited.
I think it's great from that standpoint, because it's not like you guys, with your batch 1 and 2, it's not like each batch is like 50,000 bottles, so you're kind of like really like from a niche standpoint, you've got a target audience that wants something like this. And that's what's going to resonate with whatever it is you guys do, period. People will want to explore what it is that you have going on. So, I think just kind of how you are doing it right now seems like, from my standpoint, because like you and I are more into the whiskey nerdum part of it, that we know like that's going to be quality. We may not know what the flavor profile is, but we know what the components kind of are, that we know that 17 years something is going to have some complexity and something interesting, So I think, in fairness of what you guys did, I'm glad you didn't dump a bunch of water in this and just try to kind of appease the masses. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I don't think I promise you we never will. That's just not what we're interested in. And really, I think it's funny, the batches you talked about, sort of doing smaller batches. Honestly, we did what we could afford. We didn't raise capital. We've basically been hustling our asses off as for hire brand ambassadors to try to put together a war chest so we could make a big enough buy. Because you can't walk into these, it seems easier than you'd think. You think you just walk in and say, hey, I'd like to buy 5 barrels. So I'm going to blend it, and that'll be it. Like you have to come in with a certain amount of volume in mind. Yeah. And so we bought as much as we could afford. We threw the kitchen sink at it, and it was like, okay, everything we got, let's put into this. And that turned out to be 1,300 bottles and 1,300 bottles roughly. Batch. But for us, I think one of the exciting thing was we said, we're never going to make the same thing twice, right? From the batches standpoint, eventually maybe we'll make something that's a little bit more accessible from a price point standpoint, that's a little bit more consistent. Yeah. But we will do batches that are different every time for as long as this company exists.
And I love that. Because we can all go somewhere for consistency. We know that. We know totally. all the small batches, whatever it may be. But to get these things where something that you're going to get is going to be different and unique, there's a lot of us who want that. Like, that's a cool thing. Like, it doesn't have to be the same. The same is, not boring, but we know we can get the same somewhere else, so having that option of something different and quality like this is something cool. So, All right, why don't we dive into batch 2? We'll kind of talk a little bit about that. I'll bring up batch 2 on the screen, and then we can talk a little bit more about that. And this was, here's one thing I'll also say, like the more I kind of sip on this and drank it before, that really nice citrus note, these citrus notes really start to explode. It becomes like almost like a orangesicle. Like that was one thing in my mind that orange creamsicle was like really starting to resonate with me. So, but oh man.
Yeah, I honestly, that is the challenge with new oak on one hand, and the freedom of using refill casks on the other hand, right? Basically, like new oak's amazing, but the problem is that it creates caramel, it creates vanilla, it creates black cherry, it creates the things that we love.
Yeah.
But it blocks out some of the other things that you want. And so being able to use barrels that had been in refill casks or had spent time in used oak before new oak, we're playing with components that I don't know, you don't usually have access to.
Yeah.
So it was cool.
One of the things that kind of reminded me of a little bit was, and I hope this doesn't like offend you or anything, but the profile was a bit along the lines of like what a light whiskey, sweet, spicy, little bit of heat, that kind of had a little bit of that profile, that orange, that citrus, maybe some like lemon, a little bit in there. But light
whiskey suffers from its name primarily, which is light whiskey. I mean, the nomenclature around that is the death of anybody ever doing it successfully. The thing I would most compare it to is probably be Scotch, right? Because the Scots have that cooler climate. They insist on aging. The most coveted casks are what they would call first fill casks, right? First fill ex bourbon, first fill ex sherry. It's the first time since it had whatever was in there previously. And the reason is they know that they're going to be aging it for a long time. And so they don't want to bombard it with oak early. They want it to get this smooth amount of oak so that a lot of other flavors can develop in tandem without it getting bitter. And so like batch 1 is really funny. I don't know if you've ever met Holly. What is Holly's last name? Is Sidewan? It's with an S. She's her whiskey love. She's like a rock star up in upstate New York and used to be in Boston. And she's a Scotch, she's a Scotch guru. And she was in a tasting by surprise that I was doing a few months ago. And she typed right into the box. She said, "I can tell that you love Kleinleich." And I was just like, that is ridiculous that you can call that out, because I loved the from a texture standpoint, but also Kleinleich has that citrus note from a Scotch standpoint, and pulling that into an American style whiskey is something that we were really trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it is very interesting that you kind of broke it down, that way. And I've never been much of a Scotch guy, but I love the history part of it, and I kind of like listening to what people have to say about it. But I can see where some of those components could easily be part of that. So. And I think it's really cool that, for us, like, here in America, we see kind of how you put the 66%, the 33 and 4, all that other stuff. We look at that as a conventional mash bill, but it's really just your blending of your 100% components into those ratios, which is really cool.
It's fundamentally different because honestly, like a 66-34 mash grain ratio from Canada is much more like an 80-15 rye mash bill in the US, because you really are. Look, if you distill a ton of corn and you distill a ton of rye, you will get 7 parts corn from a volume standpoint to 4 points rye, right? So basically, like, it's almost 2 to 1. And so whenever you look at a mash bill in the US, you have to factor in that rye is so low in starch content. It's very, very low. It's a fickle, asshole of a grain to try to work with, but it brings so much to the table. But as a result, like a little, it's like salt, a little goes a really long way.
Yeah. Well, here we go. I just sold a bottle of batch 1 and 2 for you. There you go. So it's good. Christopher David, he's another super passionate super passionate about whiskey. Great guy. I mean, he knows a lot about whiskey and stuff as well. Big Scotch guy. So I'll be interested to talk to him down the road to see kind of how some of these resonate with him from that side of it. But
Christopher, if you're a Clynelish or Aurora fan, for me, like I look at whiskey very, very holistically. I have a real thing for Japanese whiskey and Scotch and rye and bourbon and Canadian. The only I'm going to offend somebody, but the only category I've had a lot of trouble getting into is Irish. It's just become. I mean, look, in 1972 or whatever, there were only 2 Irish distilleries left. It's just gotten so one-dimensional. But Christopher, just like if you like Clynelish, and if you don't like Clynelish, if you haven't had it, try it. But seriously, just try the rye with that in mind, and I think you're gonna go, oh damn, he does like that waxy, citrusy note to be in there, even just a little bit.
It's interesting that you kind of throw in there the Japanese whiskey and a little bit of the Scotches. You can definitely, the more you kind of like, I listen to you and you drink it, you can see where that probably plays a key role in like the blending and your profile that you've got set up on these. So,
well, we'd be real assholes. I mean, honestly, like we're Americans making Canadian whiskey for Americans. It's like pretty damn convoluted to begin with. We better be international to understand what the hell we're doing.
That's good. That's good. So, all right, let's talk about batch 2 and what we've got going on. Let me bring up the screen for batch 2 and let's see here. Okay, there we go. Let me go back here. Yeah, they're both very interesting, but now we're going to kind of get into a little bit more of I guess I don't know if we want to call it like more of a bourbon-ish kind of profile. I don't know if that's really a fair.
Honestly, people all the time will text me and say, hey, where can I get the bourbon you guys make? And for us, we're laughing because like there are like 5 reasons why it's not bourbon. The first being that it wasn't distilled in the U.S.
Already a strikeout right off the bat.
But honestly, we're totally not against that because we're totally not against that because honestly, like. We're trying to with this whiskey, we're trying to speak to bourbon drinkers, right? Yeah. Obviously, right? Like we made an 80% corn, 19% rye, 1% malted barley. Yeah. And so the people making that mistake is or whatever, or people just shortening it. Honestly, I don't know that we can legally call it anything other than cask strength whiskey. Yeah. It wasn't bottled in Canada, so I believe it's not legally Canadian, and it wasn't made in the US, so it's definitely not legally bourbon. But we just submitted it as a cask strength whiskey. Sorry, I want to pause for 2 seconds.
Sure.
Sugar Kitty just called out the 1998 Clynelish 11 year, which is one of my personal favorite whiskeys. I am obsessed with that whiskey, and it's funny that I assume you're talking about the Gordon and MacPhail. So just like Gordon MacPhail, little independent bottler in Scotland that just changed the Scotch industry forever. And if you're a history nut like I am, that's always been one of the ones that I love. But sorry, so Found North Batch 2, hilarious. If you go read our copy, like if you read the front page, you'll immediately notice that we talk about rye, right? I mean, it was like we thought we were like rye. We're gonna make rye from Canada. That's gonna be our thing. Mm-hmm. And then in here you can see we found a lot. So like in whiskey, if you want to go use, I think Four Roses is just a great example in general. When Four Roses makes a recipe, what they do is they distill all day one recipe from one batch of corn, from one batch of rye, from one batch of barley.
Mm-hmm.
It goes into all barrels from the same cooperage, and it goes into all the same parts, all the same spot in one part of one warehouse, right? Mm-hmm. And they call that a lot, right? So they'll say, okay, this is a lot. And the idea is Four Roses can pump out about 150 barrels a day. So they'll have 150 barrels that'll age very consistently. So when you work with, as a blender, when you're working with a distillery wherever, but be it Canada, they will send you a sample from one barrel from one lot that's generally very representative of that lot from a flavor standpoint. And so, but when you get these sample bottles, when you get these plastic sample bottles that they send you, it usually has like a barcode. It's like, sample 2004.56. W3425. It's like, Jesus, okay, how do I differentiate that from everything else? Naturally, what we did was we took a Sharpie on every single bottle and went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So sample 18, as we discuss in here, sample 18 was very, very special to us. Like, I have a genuine affection for sample 18, which is just a shit name for a sample, but you know what? Sample 18 is my friend. Sample 18 was the corn whiskey that actually went into, it was the sister whiskey to the whiskey that went into batch 1. So it was the same corn component. And what happened was we made this rye with this, using this ex-Speyside and this ex-Hungarian cask that we had, blending it with sample 18 as the sort of minority corn component. And then we had this rye that was aged in ex-wheated bourbon barrels. Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Holy shit. It was like, it was minty with this Irish butter, and then this really interesting, like, almost toffee and cinnamon spice. I mean, it was just, and we were like, this is going to be batch 2. Batch 2 is going to be, a majority this rye. And we said, but we have this corn component, and we're going to blend it with this corn component because this corn component is amazing, and it balances out the astringency, and it gives it more of a tannic profile, and we love it. And so we started blending it. And first we did 80% rye, 20% corn. And it was, all right, well, let's try it at 70% rye, 30% corn. And we said, oh, shit, it got better. And then we were like, all right, well, let's try it at 60% rye, 40% corn. And then we had a meeting, because it was better at 60-40. And we said, do we try 50-50 and basically lose our rye designation or not? And we said, oh, okay, we'll just try it. And if it's better, then we'll decide what to do.
Right.
We tried 50-50. Then we just kept going. And when we made it at roughly 80-20, we were like, this is the best whiskey we've made. I mean, we were just, from a balance and it's 129.8 proof, and it doesn't drink a lick of that heat.
No.
And we're like,
it's. I mean, for me, I'll say, like, for me too, like, it really, like, it hits home for me. Like, it's. I mean, it's, when I first got into it, it was like right away, I got this cherry, like, fudge brownie, like, mint. I mean, it was just really nice. And I love the spice, like, up front. I mean, it was a great spice right away. And it definitely does not drink like it's like the proof. I can tell you that right now. But man, it is just a great whiskey, like, period. For what it is, it's an incredible whiskey. So
I really appreciate it. And when we were blending it, we were just, you have to remember, like, we blended this second. So we had spent 9 months, and while I would love to be able to drink all day and function, you're only blending for a few hours a day, and then you're doing all the other work for the other hours. So for 9 months, we had spent the entire time building this entire brand around, we spent this entire time building this whole brand around being a rye brand. And now the second thing we come out with is this undefined, what the hell do you call it, whiskey. And when we started writing when we started writing the copy for it and we started describing it, we just said, you know what? Like, we said, screw it. It'll never sell. We said, you know what? We'll sell batch 1 out, and then we'll sell batch 3 out. And every time we do a tasting, we'll pour batch 2. And we said there'll be this small contingency of people who taste it and forget about the fact that it's not technically a bourbon, and they'll like it and they'll drink it. And we said, but you know what? Let's just let the whiskey talk, and we'll just make the best thing, and we'll figure it out from there. And then everybody liked it better.
Dude, it is like, I mean, it is amazing. And again, I'm not just saying this. I mean, you and I and everybody in here, we try a lot of different whiskeys, whatever it may be. And I'll tell you what, I would be very hard pressed to, I think, find someone who disliked, either or one or whatever it may be from whatever they are. Now, they are different. So get that in your head that like both are different. So in a very good way. But I'll tell you what, like it's kind of like a big boy whiskey. I don't mean like any offense to any women or whatever, because there's a lot of women I know who would really enjoy.
It's a big girl whiskey.
It can be a big boy,
right?
big girl.
You're big girl, but it's an adult whiskey.
It's an adult. It's an adult whiskey, and I'll tell you, it is. It's a heavy hitter, and it's a very good, complex, lots of nice layers and everything to it. So I really. I mean, when I tried it, like right out of the gate, it was kind of like, oh, okay, oh shit, okay, what do we got here? Took a couple more, sat down, kind of took a little bit of time with it. And that was kind of like, again, a little bit of that oh shit moment where I'm like, yeah, fuck. I mean, this is a really good whiskey. And that's why I was like, man, I gotta find the guys that are behind this. This is just too good to not want to share with people. But I really hope people maybe dive into it and kind of just take a shot at these. I do not think anybody who, if you order one or both, I think you guys will be really, really pleased with both of what they have to offer. So
I think I think if you're crazy about rye,
yeah,
batch one's going to sing to you. I mean, batch 1 is going to really do it. And obviously, frankly, there are more people who are crazy about bourbon. And if you're crazy about bourbon, I think batch 2 is going to really resonate. The funny thing is, I think if you're crazy about rye, you'll still really love batch 2. And that's the thing about batch 2. Batch 2 brings spice. I mean, it brings spice to the table.
It fucking brings big spice to the table.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a lightweight from the spice category. But I think for us, look, I've had a thank you, Amy. I've had a
Amy, you're in for a treat. I'm telling you.
I've been lucky enough to do a lot of what we did to build up our, I always just call it the war chest, right? It's like the amount of money you need to be able to make a big enough buy where some big distillery will take you seriously. We did a ton of really high-end private tastings. And I've been lucky enough as a result to try some really crazy whiskeys and really crazy American whiskeys and a lot of old bourbons. And I don't mean like I've tasted some old bourbons as in the distillation date was old, back in the 30s or pre-prohibition even.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also got to taste, some of these older age-stated bourbons, and I love them on the front of the palate. I love them. I mean, they do things that you sit there and you're like, oh, shit, this is ridiculous. And then it always comes with a bitter kicker. There are very few. I mean, Stitzel-Weller did it right. You ever get your chance to, I don't care who's on if you ever get a chance to try the 20-year-old Michter's 2013, just like don't pass up on it, because I think it might be the best whiskey I've ever had. But that was what Stitzel-Weller did, was they made bourbon that was really old from an age statement standpoint, and it had everything you get from old aging, but it didn't have that bitter, pencil shaving finish. And the beauty of not to compare our whiskey to Stitzel-Weller. That's like That's sacred ground. But
Yeah.
but from an adjacent standpoint, from what we were trying to do, being able to use whiskey that went from used oak into new oak, and this is primarily 20-year-old whiskey, right? 20% of it is well, 15% of it is 17 years old, 5% of it is 16 years old, and the rest is all 20. And having all of that 20 years of aging, but not having that new oak bitterness on the end. Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like exactly what I've always been looking for from an old bourbon. And that's why we fucking made it.
You don't, and you nailed that. You don't get that harshness, that tannic oak or anything like that. I know people hate the term smooth, but it's always a good analogy. Like it's creamy. You can drink it. It's easy to drink. It's got a great flavor profile. There's nice layers and everything to it. So you can definitely pick up the nuances of the age that's there just because of the complexity part of it. But I mean, I'll tell you, it's a great whiskey. I hope everybody gets an opportunity to try some of this stuff. You guys have done a great job. So let me ask you this. So we've got batch 1 and 2. Can you share a little bit about maybe what batch? I know you've kind of alluded to 3 and 4. Can you share a little bit of info as to what maybe is kind of coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. So batch 3 and 4 are done from a blending standpoint. Now we got to work with our partners and do a little bit from a logistics standpoint, make sure our ratios work. There's some sort of stuff on the back end. But for all intents and purposes, batch 3 and batch 4 are done. And batch 3 is another big boy rye or big girl rye. The thing I'm most excited about with batch 3 is the fruit profile. We basically said, all right, we've dialed up the spice. Let's see if we can work in more of those fruit notes. And I hate telling people what it's going to taste like, because I really like people to get a chance to taste it themselves. So I won't dive too much into like specifics, but we really wanted to create something that's differentiated, something that still had that spicy pop, but something that really I find that I rarely find a rye that presents a lot of that sort of complex fruit note. You can get a lot of the creaminess, you can get sweetness, you can get caramel, and you can pair it up with that big sort of baking spice, cinnamon, nutmeg. I love that. Those ryes blow my mind. But we just said, and it's funny, you would think that as you blend, your language for describing whiskey would get more specific. Went completely the other way. And it was so funny because I remember talking to Brent Elliott about small batch limited edition. And I was like, yeah, so like, tell me the difference between 2013 and 2015. And he walked me through it and he goes, this one tastes like, caramel and vanilla. It's got a little black pepper. And he goes, this one's, well, it's caramel and it's vanilla. It's got a little black pepper. And I'm like,
that's the same.
And finally he looks at me, he goes, yeah, man, they taste good and they taste different. It was like, and I was like, wow, I thought that I was going to get, some sort of, I don't know, the shit that you read in a book that's describing whiskeys,
it's amazing. Like I've heard
jumping out.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like I've heard the same thing, like Harlan Wheatley and all these guys, they ask like, hey, and they're kind of describing their own whiskeys and they're always like, yeah, get like a little bit of vanilla, caramel. I'm like, well, fuck. I'm like, that's what everybody gets in. I'm looking to you. You made the whiskey. I need to know a little bit more than just caramel and vanilla. I mean, I could say that in every review. I mean, people need a little bit more, but
I know.
No, that's
but
awesome.
What happens is when you're thinking about it, when you're blending it, you stop being like, oh, what I really need to do is preserve this lime custard note. You don't think that way. What you start thinking about is like, I describe the whiskeys as, I all the time when I'm discussing with Sammy Karachi, who's my partner who blends with me, and we primarily do most of the blending. When I'm talking with Sammy on the phone and we're discussing a test blend, a lot of times you sit there and we go, it needs more top notes. That's it, right? You just sit there and you say, we need more top notes. And we're talking about florality and fruitiness and of course it'll come by. And when you start getting into single digit percentages, when you're saying, all right, let's try this with 10% of this X tequila barrel instead of 11%, things like that, then you're sitting there going, okay, what are you getting from 10 versus 11? And you're saying, I'm getting a little bit of that blue agave in 11 and I lose it in 10, but I get this then you get more specific. But in general, what we were trying to do, and I gave it away, there's X tequila barrels. There's rye aged in X tequila in batch 3. And it is so
really
sick.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Oh my God, it's so cool. And honestly, it was just like when we came across these barrels, we were like, we got to figure out how to use them. It wasn't easy. They're unwieldy. A lot of these things are unwieldy, and a lot of it is like, hey, we've got something that has flavors that we really want to emphasize and accentuate, but we need to do a lot to round it out and make it taste like whiskey that people know what, you know what I mean? Because it's like, we're not trying to make something, if this is the flavor profile, right? Like if this represents the flavor profile, we want to be on the edges. The idea isn't to be out fucking here where nobody knows what it tastes. You know what I mean? It's like, who cares about a whiskey that tastes like something that doesn't taste like whiskey? The point is that it's reference based. But anyway, batch 3, we were like, how can we retain the spice and the body that people expect from an aged rye, but also preserve some of these really cool top notes that we were getting from this X tequila barrels. And so that was the process. And I think, honestly, I think people are going to go nuts over it. Batch 4 is the big surprise. And it is a corn-based whiskey. So it's adjacent to batch 2, but doesn't taste anything like batch 2. And Zach would kill me if I gave away. I mean, Zach would really, really, really kill me.
If you don't want to, that's fine. I can't.
I want to so bad. Oh man. But have me on. Before they're even launched, I'll send them to you and you have me back on and we'll talk about it. And then we can really talk.
That will be awesome. I mean, I like you and I said before, I like the idea of, again, it's all whiskey, but it's something different. There's a little spin on each one. And I think that's what keeps people interested and really wanting to kind of stick with the brand, that it's your foundation is quality, but it's also pushing the envelope and trying different things. And there's other brands out there that resonate with me where they do kind of something similar, where the base is quality. So, you've got that. And then the spin happens, with the blenders or whatever, maybe the finishers. That part of it, I really enjoy. So that's pretty awesome. Let me share one thing. So Nick and I, we've been talking a little bit off, in addition to this. So what we're also going to do is for my patrons and possibly even some of Jason's as well, we'll see what we can put together. But the thought right now is for us to put a tasting together, I think of batches, like at least 1 and 2 right now. We'll get those out to people so that you can try and see what the brand is all about, what their whiskeys are all about. So we'll put a little kind of a virtual tasting together. I'll send out the sample bottles and we'll get some people involved and have a good time with it, so that everybody can have an opportunity to try, or as many people as they can to kind of try, this without maybe necessarily having to, spend all of the money right now on both bottles. But this will give you guys a good idea of what the brand is all about, what their whiskeys and the components are all about. But it's really to kind of help showcase the brand a little bit more and really kind of help get them, out there into the kind of, normalcy of the whiskey world and all of that. So all the patrons, if you're not a patron and you want to kind of get in on it, you'll have to be part of that. But anybody who is a a patron right now. We'll be kind of setting something like this up maybe within the next, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. We'll get something we'll get something put together pretty quickly here. I'll let everybody know through Patreon, and we'll see I got good feedback so far from everybody who would have been interested. So that was just a little something that we're going to put together. And then later on down the road, we may do, 3 and 4. We'll get everybody involved.
Let's do 3 and 4. Yeah.
We'll definitely get people involved in that. And this is the fun part of it is kind of the journey part of it, and sharing everything with other people and all of that. So we'll definitely be putting this one together, and 3 and 4 down the road, and then maybe get into batch 26 and 27 and 28 and 30 and all those other good stuff down the road. We'll continue the journey, but we'll start with batch 1 and 2 first. We'll start there.
With that 1 and 2. Yeah, Scott, I love that. For me, we tried to price. Honestly, we pricing these is really hard, because it was like we don't have much of a comp set. Who's selling cast strength Canadian whiskey? Like, it's just not. If you release a bourbon, you can look at your age, your proof, and then you can say, okay, we're a $60 bourbon, or we're an $80 bourbon, or a $30 bourbon, whatever we are. It's kind of tricky. We ended up doing it pretty much based on what our cost was, and just saying, all right, what's a fair margin? But for me, when I was working retail, we did hundreds of tasting. I think in the last 10 years, I've done well over 1,000 tastings at this point. And for me, it was always about like, God, people want to taste something before they buy it. I mean, so many people are buying whiskey, and I thank you guys. And I really have confidence you're going to like it, because we've talked about it, and I do. But you know what? Call me. If you don't like it, I'll buy it back from you. And I used to say that when I worked retail, because I hated that. There's nothing where and the reason I hated it was because I was about 3 weeks into my whiskey journey personally. I just started buying scotch with my own money when I was like 22 years old. When you're 22, you have no money. And I bought a bottle of whiskey based on a recommendation. And it was the most expensive bottle I'd ever bought. And I really can't dog the distillery because I work in the industry now. But I bought this whiskey, and I almost stopped drinking whiskey because of it. I bought it was a $75 bottle, and it took me like 4 months to finish, because it was like, man, I'm really in the mood for a whiskey, but all I got is this crap. Yeah. And from then on, I was like, I wish people could always try shit before they actually had to buy it. Yeah. Amy, fantastic question. Yeah. Fantastic question. We want to push the envelope. I don't think there would. I think if we came across a source of American whiskey that we really wanted to blend on its own, or frankly blend it with something Canadian, I don't think we'd be opposed to that. For us, our sort of internal motto has always been, let the whiskey speak for itself. Mm-hmm. And our attitude is look, like things like age, right? We to make batch 4, we had to use some younger whiskey, and we just don't give a shit. I think people are going to say, fuck it, we don't care, because this is what it is. Yep. Not super young whiskey, but like a little bit younger than what we've been playing with so far. And our attitude was just like, this component is so incredible, and we just don't care, and we have to use a little of it to make what we want to make. And people who were transparent about our ratios, we're transparent about where the whiskey came from, we're transparent about what's in the bottle, and so we're not trying to hide shitty whiskey with, you know what I mean? We don't try to do any of that. And so our attitude is like, our main attitude is, let's build trust with our consumers that we are really trying to make something good that they're going to like, and that we care a lot about quality. I mean, we are 100% a product first company. And so if we found American whiskey that we wanted to blend in any capacity or bottle in any capacity, hell fucking yes, we will bottle it. There's no question. We will bottle anything that moves the industry forward and gets people jacked up about drinking whiskey, period.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's nice because that allows you to, I mean, essentially explore everything. I mean, the table is wide open. I mean, you can do whatever you ultimately want to do, but at the same time, you're going to find the quality component, which is the whiskey first. And then you can play with it from there, do whatever you want, your spin, whatever that may be. And that's awesome.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's one of the things that I love when whiskey brands just take different components, do different things, and just have fun with whatever it is. So, I mean, man, keep doing what you guys are doing. It's fantastic. And I don't think you're going to be getting any calls from anybody wanting you to buy their bottles back. I can tell you that. I mean, myself and Jason, like we kind of started this, what's called the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club. And there's a lot of people where you quickly realize that, man, we have to do a good thing because people are trusting our palates and what it is that we're giving to them. And if it's shit, no one's going to buy any bottles. They're going to be like, well, these fucking suck. Why would I continue to buy these? So when you're trying different things, you start to realize, like, at the end of the day, it really boils down to, do I like it or do I not? You have a formula in your mind of how you want it to set up. But at the end of the day, if I don't want to sit down at the end of the day and drink this, then that's not for me,
Well, Scott, I love that because I think like, guys like you, there are people who trust you. And I think there's a level of, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. I want to be specific with my tasting description so that you have the best, right? Like there's a degree of like, I don't want to lead you astray. So I want to be very descriptive about what I'm tasting, what I like, and I want to be consistent. And that builds a level of trust. And I think like you and I were talking before we jumped in here. I think it's people. Like the whole industry is people. Yeah. And I think the whole excitement about it is sharing and being able to say like, hey man, you know what? I've devoted a ton of time to reviewing whiskeys, tasting a lot of whiskeys, taking it seriously, and sharing my thoughts with you. And I'm so into that. I mean, I'm so into that.
And there's a lot of people, it's a lot of great people in here. And that's the thing. You find people who, consistently have a similar, palate or profile that you do. And that's great. I mean, everybody needs, that person. Yes. So, that's the best part of it, is that some people put some trust in it, and you want to kind of do the, kind of give them something that's a high quality product. And you guys are doing that. So Ethan, I've already killed Nick about this. I pushed the envelope. I've been trying to like steal his whiskey and do blends and all that. So that would be
so.
No, go
totally.
ahead.
So a couple things real quick. First of all, I don't know if Sugar Kitty's still here. I know the signatory bottling you're talking about. I absolutely love it. And then RVA whiskey. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate you buying the whiskey. I really don't think you'll be disappointed. But seriously, founders@foundnorthwhiskey.com. You don't like it, call me and tell me about it. I want to know. And then Whiskey Nose asked me for my favorite bib, my favorite bottle in bonds. Shit, I've had a few like old rare ones that a few whiskeys deep. I'm really trying to like pull out of my head. This is gonna sound crazy, but you know what? From a value standpoint, those Henry McKenna bibs, those like when I was just getting into whiskey, I didn't know what the hell a bottle and bond was until I had Henry McKenna, and I was like, oh damn. Bib comes from Colonel E.H. Taylor, the man himself. That was something he really pushed through in 1897. And very weirdly, I found out that I'm related to him, that Zach and I are related to him. We're Taylors and related to Colonel E.H. Taylor, which was
really
like, what?
Interesting.
So I'm a big fan of the concept just from a namesake standpoint.
Cool.
And then Ethan, as to single barrels. So single barrels are really interesting. I've done a ton of barrel picks. I fucking love barrel picks. I know there's been some news recently, some people saying that barrel picks have kind of gone over the top a little bit. It's been in the news, in the whiskey news recently, and I totally know what they're talking about. There are some situations where it's like, particularly, look, there are big chain retailers that like Liquor Barn down in Kentucky. They have a devoted team that just does single barrels.
Yeah.
They know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
And then there are other big brand, big name chains where they just know that if they pick a single barrel, it'll sell.
Right.
And so I think there's kind of a bifurcation going on in the market right now. But that being said, single barrels are really important to me. Single barrels are very, very difficult for us to do. Yeah. And the reason is that I'm dead serious, and you guys come up to Boston, come to my house, I'll pour you some crazy stuff. But like the whiskeys that we have that are components from our partner distillery and the distilleries we've worked with in Canada, you can't bottle them.
Yeah.
They're not made for it.
Well, now, and here's the thing, because here's a cool thing, because Jason and I kind of did something similar with another brand where we blended our own, and it doesn't get any more unique than that. You're literally crafting your own whiskey. So I know you guys deal on a relatively smaller scale, and that could really kind of fuck things up a little bit, but for the opportunity for, whatever, I don't even know how many people it would be, but to have an opportunity to craft your own, Found North whiskey,
that would be
dude, that would be incredible.
I'm working on that. We will totally do that. In the meantime, from a single barrel perspective, we are working on a single barrel program, and what we're doing is we've been working on a blend and this is the hardest. Honestly, making good whiskey is hard. Making good whiskey that then can be transferred into single barrels, we haven't ever tried anything like that. We're in the process of doing it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a blend that, God forbid, it better taste good, but that could use some extra wood influence. And then we're going to re-rack it into single barrels. So, let's say we did 1,000 liters. We'll take 1,000 liters, put it into 5 different 200-liter single barrels, and then let them age, and then let people pick. And what I absolutely love about this is, we were talking about it really early on, right, Scott? Where it's like, it's really fun to be on the ship and and find people and inspire them to be interested in whiskey. Mm-hmm. But what I think, when I first did my first single barrel ever, which actually was a 10-year Whistle Pig. It was, I very, very affectionately know it as 118.8, because that was the proof. It was the fucking best Whistle Pig I've ever had. And I remember I have a little bit. Scott, I'm going to send you just a drop of this just so you can see what was my really early inspiration from a rye standpoint. But I remember the first time I picked something and the first time I sold it. And I was sitting there and I'm in the liquor store and somebody's going, "What is this?" And I go, "Yeah, you know what? We went up to Vermont and we picked this barrel." And the guy was like, "You picked it?" And I was like, yeah, we picked it. And this is it, and all of a sudden I felt like I was steering the ship a little bit, just being like, this is my small influence on the. Well, what's cool about, I think, what our program is going to be is those barrels are really going to be differentiated. It's not like you're going to Four Roses and choosing between an OESK and an OBSQ and whatever, and saying, all right, there are a ton of these on the market. This one's mine. There's not going to be anything like these. When you pick a barrel from us, it's going to be, submit it to a whiskey competition, see what happens, because it's going to be the only one. Yeah. And I think that's going to be fun. Yeah, no, that's awesome. And trust it, everybody who's asking all the questions, I've already partially beat Nick up a little bit. I've already planted the seed. Trust me, I'm working my angles. We'll hopefully do something down the road, and we're looking forward to it, because that's one thing, as Jason and I, one thing that we really were passionate about was
keeping people that support us involved in the picks or whatever it may be, and bringing them things that are different and unique that you're not just going to walk into a local store and get. And this fits kind of like our profile as to what we want to be bringing to people, because there's a lot of people that'd be like, well, fuck, I don't know what Found North Whiskey is, but they trust us. So that's a good thing, that when we can get people to trust us and we say it's good and you'll enjoy it. That's what we really wanted to kind of get to. So
yes. Heck
all
yes.
right. So let me ask you this. So we're already an hour and 20 minutes in. That went quickly, but what does kind of, we've talked about it a little bit, but what is the future kind of looking like for Found North at this point? And yeah.
Honestly, so I don't personally, I try not to put too much stake into awards and ratings and scores and things like that, because I know, having lived in the industry for years now, I know some of that stuff, it's both subjective and sometimes there's some stuff going on. I won't get too specific about things that you hear about how people get certain ratings and rankings. And
yeah,
I had one whiskey writer once say to me, if they're paying for ad space in X whatever,
yeah,
the managing editor, when he sees the reviews from his guys, is going to go, you can't pan that whiskey. You know what I mean? And that was enough for me to be like, okay, so how do you really discern what's good? That being said, we before the whiskey was released, we submitted both of them to the San Francisco World Spirits Competition.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just like, SF, the thing about SF is they do it blind. The only thing people know is like the category and the proof, I think, is all the reviewers know.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother called me and he was like, hey, I got good news. And I was like, what happened? He was like, at San Francisco, we got our results back from San Francisco. And I was like, did we get a gold? And he was like, he was like, yeah, no, better than that. I was like, we get a double gold? And he goes, both. I was like, what? What the fuck?
Yeah.
I honestly, I was like, because again, when we made these, we thought there's this profile, there's this contingency of consumers that are going to love this. And they're going to people who just don't understand cask strength, don't understand big spice, don't really understand 129.8 proof. And they're just not going to like it, and that was sort of the attitude.
Yeah.
But that kind of changed the landscape for us because suddenly like the state of Oregon reached out to us and said, we want to carry your product. You know what I mean? It wasn't just, it was like, the control states were like, hey, we're in. And so that kind of changed the direction a little bit. But more than that, the popularity of batch 2 has really freed us up a little bit to do some more interesting experimental stuff. I again, Sammy. So just nobody will. I mean, it'll be a little sort of off the grid here, but Sammy Karachi is one of the guys on our team. He's formerly a utterly brilliant mixologist in Boston. He became the Edrington brand ambassador, so Macallan and Highland Park.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he and I got to know each other, because he was always selling me really expensive shit from Macallan. And when I was working retail, and he's a nose savant. And he has been fucking around with some blends, some really, really old shit with young stuff, some different cask types, some really crazy stuff. And I think for us, we're going to see how much tolerance do people have for experimenting and really seeing like, what if we blended this with this? What do you think about that? Let's see if it works. Let's see. And I think the better the liquid keeps coming out, and we'll see what happens with batch 3 and batch 4. I think they're really going to ring people's bell. But if we sort of keep our confidence going and building here, I really think we'll start doing some more experimental stuff.
Man, I just think this is kind of, I don't want to say like a trend, because I know people hear trend and that's kind of a bad thing, but I think with what it is that you guys are doing, just in terms of, blending and creating something that's so kind of different and unique resonates a lot with just people within the whiskey community, is that it's going to be something different and unique. And again, if it's quality, then, people are going to know that, it's going to resonate really, really strongly with them. So that's the cool part about what it is you guys are doing, is you're just continuing to kind of push the envelope and creating these different and unique things. Because like I said before, we all know where we can go to get, tried and true. We know that, but,
and that's important.
and it's very important, because each one creates its own base. Because if you have like, we'll just stick with Four Roses. If you just have like a regular small batch Four Roses, you know what you're going to get. You go to this, and then you're kind of like in that, oh shit, here we go. This is something completely different and unique in a very good way. So that's a cool thing. And I think there's a lot of people out there nowadays that really appreciate what this is, even though they may not really truly understand what everything is that goes into it. They just know, I like this a lot and it's good.
I love that about, so I will tell you right now, 5 years ago, it was much harder. There were just more people who were, this is what I drink.
Yeah.
Right. Like I drink bourbon. That's not a bourbon. I'm not interested. And I drink single malt.
Yep.
Oh, you're making Compass Box? You're making cool blends? No, fuck you. Oh, you're from Japan? No, not interested. Yeah. And I think the really cool thing about where the whiskey industry has gone over the last 5 or 6 years is with the contingency that you are honest about where your liquid is from, what it is, and why you did it.
Yep.
As long as you do that, there are a lot more consumers out there who say, I'm gonna give this a try. And those are the consumers that we're dying to speak to. I mean, really. And I see Big Vic reached out to me and wants a signed bottle. Is there a way to, my email is nick at foundnorthwhisky.com. So nick at foundnorthwhisky.com. Email me. I'll help you out if you want something like a signed bottle. It's a little trickier than that, but we can figure that kind of thing out.
Yeah, you guys are really going to dig this whiskey, and that's where I'm really looking forward to putting this kind of virtual tasting together. Is that for anybody who hasn't had a chance to get these, and that will be your first dive into both of these. I think people are going to really be pleasantly surprised by what it is. So that'll be an awesome event. So
Scott, there's doing a whiskey tasting from and really going hey, this is oh man, I think for me the most exciting thing about whiskey is we talked about the people, but sort of the connectedness and whiskey is whiskey's like a story that you hear, and then you find out at the end that all the characters are real and the story's true. And you're like, what? How is that possible?
Yeah.
And that was part of how I got into whiskey. And that for me was I remember, Jesus, I keep going back to Scotch because I started in Scotch. But if you ever drink a Glendronach, which is like Macallan on steroids, if you ever drink a Glendronach, the story of James Allardyce in 1826 and how he was bringing casks to basically was bringing a keg of this stuff around to different taverns and desperately trying to sell it. And that's how the brand started. And you get into those stories blow my mind because they're real. And then we're drinking, and then we get to, at the end of the story, it's like a childhood story. My dad never read books to me. He told stories to me. And then at the end, that's it. You go to bed. In whiskey, at the end, you drink.
That's very true. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I love telling those stories. So please, guys, do join this tasting because I think we're gonna have a lot of fun.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun, and it'll be fun to kind of share this with other people who are going to be excited to try something different and new. And it's definitely that. You guys will really be you'll be, I think, ecstatic. I mean, it'll be great. And I'll be putting more information. I'll talk with Nick a little bit more. We'll put a date and time and stuff together here pretty soon, and we'll get this thing planned and get some samples and everything shipped out to everybody. So I guess with that being said, you kind of hit on it before. Where can everybody find you? Website, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because I'm terrible at this, and my brother is sophisticated, and I'm not. And he always like, "Yeah, did you tell people where you can follow us? And you tell people about the mailing list and that they can buy online?" And I'm always like, "Oh, no, I was too busy waxing rhapsodic about ships and bullshit." You know, but guys, yeah, please, go to the website foundnorthwhisky.com, and on there you can sign up for our mailing list. And we do not bombard you with emails. We do not send you bullshit emails about, cocktails that you can, although you can make good cocktails from our whiskey, which I learned from Sammy, but that's another story. But seriously, we send an email out when there's a product available that you want. And then follow us on Instagram. We love that. If you ever post about us and you tag us, it's me. I'm always the asshole in there who's joking around with you and talking to you about it. We love that kind of engagement. So Instagram's big for us at foundnorthwhisky.com. And seriously, like we put right on there, email the founders. And can you click on that one, Scott?
Yeah, let me get on that. Let's see.
I don't want you guys just seeing my face. So that's my brother. You can tell we like each other. That's actually hilariously, people are always like, "Is that Canada?" And it's not. It's actually Alaska. We went on a family trip. Hilariously, like seriously, this is I always get confused with this. This is Denali Brewing Co. is what I'm wearing here. Like we don't even have branded. Who has time to make branded stuff? We're too busy trying to make whiskey. So I'm literally wearing a Denali Brewing Co. a shirt because I love this little brewery found in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. But seriously, like if you go to email the founders and you email us, I will fucking respond. Period. If you ask me any question about our whiskey, unless I've signed an NDA, which I have, so I can't disclose the distillery. But literally, other than that, if you ask me a question, I will answer. I love talking to you guys. There's nothing more fun for me. And seriously, whiskey is. It's funny because I'm really into collecting whiskey. My problem is I always drink it.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's funny. It's funny about that because like. I always think of whiskey as whiskey's a time capsule, right? Literally, I think one of the coolest whiskeys I ever sold was we had a McPhail's Collection 1937 50-year-old that we sold that was bottled in 1987, and all I did at the tasting was I was working at Gordon's, and all I did was I had this slideshow, and it said all the shit that was invented in 1937. All the shit was invented in 1987, and then all the shit was invented in 2016 when we were drinking it. And the idea was like, everybody who made that whiskey's dead. And there's something really genuinely cool about the time capsule. But guess what? Time moves on. So open that bottle and enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
So seriously, there's nothing better than drinking with you guys. There's nothing better than talking with you guys. And seriously, reach out to us because we'll respond and we will be involved.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think anybody can see that if you're part of that tasting, there's a few passionate things that are going to come out and keep people interested. And it's just an extension of sharing someone's passion, whatever that may be. And that's the best part of it. I mean, like drinking whiskey that's what it's supposed to be. It's to be shared with friends and family and all of that. And the best part of it is, I mean, you can have a million different conversations about a million different things. And that's the best part of it. Everyone's sharing and having a good time. And that's one of the best things about whiskey for me. So.
Seriously, is anybody's best whiskey experience looking at a bottle and not opening it?
Agree. Agree. I mean, there are a lot of people who you see get a lot of great whiskeys that will probably never open it because the look of it is you kind of feel bad about those things. I mean,
if you've got the last Red Hook rye, I get it. That's a piece of history. But like Hey, you know, you got something that's delicious. Find an occasion and
Yeah.
open it, and make sure I'm there, because I will drink it and enjoy it with you, and
Man,
I'll bring something cool myself.
speaking of Red Hook Rye, when I was down in Kentucky last week with my dad, we stopped in at a place that sells a lot of that stuff. You probably know what I'm talking about. And
Yes.
they had, so the time prior, I had been there about a month before, and in this storefront, they've got a lot of whiskey and glass and all of that. And everyone's over by all the pappy and this and that. And they're staring at it like a, moth to a flame. And I kind of turn around, I look up in the upper left-hand corner, and it says Red Hook Rye. And there's nobody over there. And I so badly wanted to say, like, every one of you assholes literally turn around 180 degrees. You're looking at maybe one of the most special whiskeys, doesn't matter what it is, period, just sitting up there. So I was down there last week and it was gone. I asked one of the guys, I said, what? I see it's gone. What did it end up selling for? And I could have swore he said like 40 or 50 grand. And it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I knew not long ago, like, now this is probably a few years ago, they were in that 25-ish
Yeah,
range.
I was going to say they were 25. Yeah, it's not surprising. Yeah, but, I will say, I think one of the coolest whiskey experiences I've had personally, it's we all have these sort of fun experiences. I'll share two quick stories with you. The first was, I was working in the industry for the first time. It was 2014. I was really new to the industry. I went to Whiskey Fest for the first time, and in New York City. And I was there, and I was talking to one of the suppliers. It was the anchor supplier that's now hodling. And she said, hey, she said, hey, Nick, do you want to? We're all going to St. Andrew's Pub, which before it closed a few years ago was sort of the most famous Scotch whiskey pub in New York, which is right in Times Square. And I said, yeah, I'm going. Yeah, hell yes, And I went over there. I totally knew the industry, and I sat down at the bar with Matt Hoffman, the master distiller at Westland.
Mm-hmm.
I was there with Gregory Fitch, who is the sort of CEO. He's the head of hodling at the time. And then I was there with Jesus, I've had too many whiskeys and I'm forgetting his name. The master distiller at Cavalon, Ian Chang, and I was there with a couple of, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, holy shit, right? It's like we're six people, and these people are all really serious in the whiskey industry. So of course, like, we sit down, and I'm like, I got the first round, So I went over to the bar, and I'm looking over at the bar, and I'm looking at everything, and I'm like, what the hell do you order? And of course, what you order, and anybody who works in the industry, you order whatever the guys you're drinking with make. Right? Yeah. Depletions, like that's period. That's the rule of thumb. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, all right, do I order Cavalon or do I order Westland? But I'm looking over there and I see this bottle and it looks like a Port Ellen. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And for those of you who are solely bourbon drinkers, Port Ellen is Stitzel Weller of Scotch, right? It's like anytime you can get your hands on it, you just jump on it, right? It's old school Pappy Van Winkle kind of stuff, but it's on the Scotch side. And so I called the bartender. It's the busiest night of the year. I called the bartender over and I said, can I look at that bottle? And he says, yeah. And he brings it over, he hands it to me, and I'm looking at it, and it's a 27-year-old Port Ellen, which is ridiculous because Port Ellen closed in 1984, and I'm like, I say, hey, what's this cost? And the guy's kind of getting a little antsy with me, the bartender's getting a little itchy with me, because I'm asking all these questions and not ordering, and there are a ton of people there. Yeah. And he looks into the system, can't find it in the system, looks through the books, and he comes back to me and he goes, hey, I'm new here. And I said, uh-oh. Yeah. And he said, what do you say about $10 a glass?
Oh my God.
I'm 24 years old, right? I look him dead in the eye and I go, I say, you need to get your manager because you're about to get fired.
Yeah.
And he was like, what? He went completely kind of white, then angry. Then he went and got the manager, and the manager comes over and he's like, what? He's like pissed. He's like, what are you calling me over for? And I said, hey, I asked what this cost. And he said to me that it's $10 a glass. I know this isn't $10 a glass, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble, and I'm just curious what it costs. And the guy just, his face goes totally soft, you know, like, oh my God, he can't believe that I didn't just say, yeah, I'll take the bottle, you know, and so he says, how many are you in your party? And I said, there are 6 of us. And he goes, all right, great. Let me tell you this. The first round's $10 a glass. And I said, all right, awesome. And I said, out of curiosity, what's the second round? He says, it's $3.50 a glass. And so I said, all right, great. So I walk over to this table with 6 big pours of Port Ellen 27-year-old. And I slide around. I don't say a fucking word. I slide it around the room. And these are all single malt guys, right? So it's like they're sniffing it, and Hoffman's sniffing it and going, what the hell? And Ian Jackson. And finally, one of them turns to me and goes, hey, what is this? And I said, it's Port Ellen 1984. You guys got the next round.
Oh my God, that's awesome. I mean, it was it's not only awesome that the manager like owned up and said, you know, hey, we'll do this, because
unbelievably cool.
Hey, he took a bit of a bath on that. That's for sure.
A bullet.
You know,
but
yeah, I would definitely want to be the first round guy and not the second round guy with 6 guys in the party. That's for sure. But that's that is awesome. That is awesome. Well,
but hey, that's how I feel about it. Right.
Thanks so much for joining tonight. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward even more to doing the virtual tasting now, just to be able to, you know, really just share with other people, you know, what it is that you guys are doing, what you've got coming and all of that. I think it's going to be one of those things that more people are really going to start to kind of jump on board. So I'm excited for that for you guys. So that's awesome.
Dude, Scott, you're an amazing host, and you guys are an incredible audience. Jim Morris, I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at Julio's, and guys, thank you so much for all the great comments. If I missed anything, please, seriously, hit me up with an email. There's nothing I like better than answering stuff. And Scott, if there's anything I can do for you, hit me up. Let me know. Yeah,
and I appreciate you joining and all of that tonight. Awesome show. So everybody, thanks so much for joining tonight. Like we were talking before, we'll be putting the virtual tasting and stuff together here pretty soon. I'll let everybody through the Patreon stuff know the little more details on that coming up soon. But Nick, again, thank you so much for joining tonight. Everybody in the chat, thanks again for joining. Always great to see everybody. And next week, don't know what I've got going on yet right now, but I'll put something together that's fun for you guys. So appreciate everything. Nick, again, thanks everybody for joining tonight.
Cheers.
And we'll see you guys next Tuesday. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.